How to stop opioid cravings. This depends on what type of user we're talking about. So if somebody has been on a prescription recently who's taken it appropriately and then suddenly stopped it, they might feel uncomfortable and going through mild withdrawal. In that situation, it's best to let your physician know, and they can get you back on a smaller dose and slowly wean you off the opioid. That's the ideal. If for somebody who's been a drug abuser of opioids, it's a little bit different. So in this situation, they've had some sort of dependence both physically on the drugs, so they might feel physical withdrawal when they stop to a much higher degree, and then there's also a psychological dependence as well. In that situation, sometimes an opioid replacement therapy is the best option, and this includes either methadone or Suboxone. Both of them are considered opioid replacement therapy. These don't have the typical effects that make a person high, but it gets them comfortable, so to avoid the withdrawal syndrome, and then eventually to wean them slowly off these medications so they can prevent going through cravings. That being said, cravings are something that will occur for years to come in somebody who's had a heavy-duty addiction. This becomes a way of life. They may have become a coping tool or a crutch for them. So an opioid craving in that situation, where a person is having a very difficult time, it's probably a good idea for them to consider either an intensive outpatient rehab or to enter residential rehab. This is where it's not just abstaining from the drug that's important, but they learn to change their lifestyle. This is the more enduring way of ensuring a long-term recovery, and that's to learn new behaviors, things to avoid cravings, how to replace cravings, to recognize them. And when I say replace a craving, to realize sometimes to go out for a breath of fresh air, or sometimes to have a piece of gum, for example, to replace it. But I learned personally in my own rehabilitation that cravings are really strong in the beginning, and with time, when you get so used to snuffing them out, that it gets easier. They get less intense over time, and they last a lot less. Shorter period of time. So it becomes a talent, a skill, if you will, at dealing with the cravings, to recognize certain things can cause them, like stresses. Generally, that's the way it works. Some sort of stress can cause them to crave. Sometimes they crave for no apparent reason, but to just realize it's temporary. Most of them last a minute or so, or even less, and it's just a matter of time that if they get more and more practice at handling cravings, that things become easier. Lastly, it's important not to entertain a craving. So this is where a person starts entertaining thoughts about it and perhaps glorifying things. So planning in their head of how they might use. So it's not just a craving anymore. This is now a little bit deeper. This is where a person is planning on using and going back to their days when they were using and reliving that in their mind. And that's very unhealthy. So it's not good if a person is craving, and to sort of engage it and allow it to grow. In rehab, you learn to just recognize it and stop it right away. If it starts getting to the point where a person is glorifying it and glamorizing it and trying to relive their past and planning in any which way, that's a high risk for a relapse. So to summarize, how to stop cravings depends on which kind of user we're talking about. There's weaning off the drug, whether it's been used for short term, that's fine by using your family physician and taking gradually smaller doses, to people who are drug abusers and not intensive, where they can potentially just also go off on smaller medications, to opioid replacement therapy, which is a temporary method of weaning off of it and avoiding withdrawals, and then to full rehab, where dealing with cravings it tackles the issue, which is the not only the psychological craving, but also tackling the issue of not engaging into any thoughtful exercise on how they might use in the future. So recognizing it and keeping it to a minimum. The other thing is cravings will get better over time as a person gets more and more rehearsed and practiced at dealing with them.